Thank you so much for joining in for our Speakeasy session with Scott Brison and Linda Hasenfratz. I would like to start today by acknowledging that Dalhousie is located in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. We recognize that African Nova Scotians are distinct people whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kmaq known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. So welcome, like I said, everyone to our Speakeasy session with Scott and our special guest, Linda. This is our third Speakeasy session and our second one online. We're excited to be able to open the conversation up to more people and to share the video online for those who perhaps can't attend in person while we're hosting this evening. Through our sessions, we're hoping to give our alumni the opportunity to have meaningful conversations and access to a global network of various leaders. So that's why we were lucky enough to welcome Linda and have Scott here to chat with us today. So a few housekeeping items before we jump right in. We encourage people to turn their cameras on, but please do keep yourselves muted. Feel free to use the chat box. However, this is an opportunity for you to make comments, pose questions, seek out connections, that sort of thing. So the session itself, like I said, will be recorded. And just so you are fully aware, the conversation initially will last about 20 minutes, leaving us 30 minutes for Q&A, which is really what we want to get into. So have you have the opportunity to pose questions. So while the conversation is going, make sure you're thinking about questions and what you may want to ask, or feel free to even put them in the chat as you think of them, and we'll get to them at the Q&A portion. During the Q&A, if you're not comfortable posing a question live, that's okay. You can, like I said, put it in the chat, and I'm happy to pose the questions for you. If you are comfortable posing the question as we come to them, you can feel free to speak up, or just raise your hand as well in Zoom, and we will call on you. Today, as I mentioned, very, very lucky to have the Honorable Scott Brison and Linda Hasenfratz. They are both leaders in the industry. We've already shared their bios, so you've already seen those. So now we're just going to start, and each of them will take sort of 2 to 3 minutes to tell us a little bit about themselves and how they got started in their careers. And while they're talking, just so you know, for the view, depending on, you can go in speaker mode or gallery mode. If you want to focus just on Linda and Scott, if you find where Zoom says view, if you click on speaker instead of gallery, then you'll have the view of just Linda and Scott. And we'll over to you, Scott.
Great stuff. Thanks, Shelley. And delighted to be here with one of my very favorite leaders, Linda Hasenfratz. Now, I've known Linda for a few years now. I've gotten to know her when I was in government, president of the Treasury Board, and she was one of the leaders in the development of a super cluster strategy. And I think her advice was very helpful and important. And but it's also a testament to her citizenship, that beyond being executive chair and CEO of one of Canada's great national champions, Linamar, in advanced manufacturing equipment and vehicles, and a wide range of areas, big company, global reach. She also finds time to serve the broader community. She has she's Canadian chair of the Canada-US Council on the Advancement of Women Entrepreneurs. She has been named the Outstanding CEO of the Year in Canada. She's a former chair of the Business Council of Canada, which represents the biggest companies in Canada. She's been a director of CIBC, another Canadian bank, from 2004 to 2020. She earned, as I mentioned, I think I already mentioned, Order of Canada, but she also has honorary degrees from Ryerson and Wilfrid Laurier, and I think Western, where incidentally, to my Dow community friends on the call, I'm Chancellor at Dow. Linda is actually Chancellor at the University of Western Ontario. And she's doing this, I think, based on my experience with her. It's very consistent with her commitment to do everything she can to help support young people, and particularly as they're contemplating their careers and lives during a pretty complex but incredibly exciting period in our history. So I don't want to talk about me because I'm boring as hell. I'd rather talk about Linda. My background is pretty much out there, and combines both business, private equity, investment banking, and government and public service. And it doesn't. My career kind of looks like if you looked at one of those ECG charts in the hospital, and if you had somebody with a series of mini strokes, that's kind of what my career, if you were to plot it on a graph, looks like. It makes absolutely no sense. So I think my career advice to people might be kind of limited. Linda, on the other hand, has had a stellar career, but she's also been a real nation builder and somebody who, whether it's on Canada-China issues, industrial strategy, any of these areas, she's thoughtful. She's one of the few CEOs I've known who has a real interest in public policy and an understanding of public policy, which I think is really helpful. And she also has 4 children who are in various stages of education. And so I suspect she's giving advice to them from time to time. And so she's probably well versed at answering questions for people who are contemplating their life and career. So I will shut up and turn it over to Linda to give a little intro of herself, and then we can get into some. I've got a few questions, but then to all our folks from the Dow community on this call, please think of some of your questions for Linda. Linda, incidentally, is in New Zealand right now. So when I say Linda Hasenfratz is ahead of her time, she's certainly ahead of our time because it's Wednesday at 10:30, roughly 10:30 a.m. Over there. And the last time I saw her, we were both in India, in Delhi, a few weeks ago for the Trilateral Commission meetings where she and I are both a member. So Linda, you tire me out just thinking of your travel. I thought I was bad, but welcome and thank you for doing this, and looking forward to hearing from you and having a conversation.
Thanks so much, Scott. It's a real pleasure to be here and with the group from Dalhousie. So that's great. So just a few minutes of introduction then. I'll introduce Linamar a little bit as well for those on the line who might not be familiar. We're a diversified advanced manufacturing company. What that means is we're taking the very latest in terms of technology and the enormous power of modern computing and intersecting it with our deep manufacturing expertise to come up with really innovative solutions for our customers. It's just a really exciting time to be in the what we now call advanced manufacturing industry. We're about 70% in our business in automotive, so automotive components and systems, and about 30% in industrial businesses such as access equipment that we make under the brand name Skyjack, and agricultural equipment like harvesting equipment or tillage. Our sales are about $8 billion. We have 28,000 employees globally. We're manufacturing in 11 countries in 66 facilities. 27 of those plants and 13,000 employees, so around a little less than half, like 45% of that is in Canada. So we are a very proud and strong Canadian organization. We have a fantastic team here in Canada. Our Canadian operations are our most productive globally, which is great. And we've really built this global organization from this amazing foundation right here in Canada. So a little bit about myself. I started at Linamar in 1990 as a machine operator after I completed an undergraduate degree in science at Western. I worked through sort of every aspect of our company to learn the business from the ground up, which I found to be really invaluable experience for me to sort of see the company from all those different angles. Once I moved into a leadership role, which I did after around 4 years. I started my first plant at Linamar in 1995. I took my second, I started my second in 96, and I was just starting my third in 97 when I actually kind of leaped up to become chief operating officer of what at the time was 18 plants for the overall company in 97. I became president in 99, CEO in 2002, and I remain such today. As you've noted, my husband and I had 4 children between 1996 and 2000, so it was a very high production sort of time frame there for us. At the same time, I completed an MBA through an executive program at Ivy, again with Western, which again, I found to be really invaluable in terms of complementing the sort of practical experience that I was getting at Linamar with a more, more theory and ideas that I learned in my MBA. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about Linamar.
Thanks very much, Linda. And starting off, advanced manufacturing, from when you started to today, manufacturing is it's just the rapidity of change and the technological change is amazing. But it's, how do you see AI and robotics, plus potentially, as quantum computing brings a lot more power to all of this processing? How do you see that affecting Linamar? And I think a question that a lot of, how do you as a CEO balance sort of the CapEx type of investments you have to make, or you have to make, but being on the leading edge of these things, but not necessarily on the bleeding edge, like the being competitive today, but making the kinds of investments that ensure that you're world leading in the future. How do you, how do you see that world, the AI, robotics, machine learning? What are you doing with it now? And where do you see that in the future in terms of Linamar? And also broadly, where do you see it in terms of the Canadian economy, jobs, different, curious about how you look at that.
Yeah, well, I'd say a few things in that regard. First of all, that I think it's the most exciting time in history to be in the advanced manufacturing field because of the enormous change that we are going through thanks to artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we're in, and as you've pointed out, that I've just seen enormous change in this industry over the last 30 years that I have been, an active participant in it in terms of how we do things. So certainly, highly automated. Our shop floors are, much more automated than we would have ever seen in the past. Now that's something that's been evolving, I'm going to say, for the last 10 years, that we've been automating more and more. And as new production lines come on, the level of automation only increases. It's kind of interesting because manufacturing's almost become more of a technology business than anything else, because we need more and more automation technicians, continuous improvement programmers, to manage all of this automation. So it's really changing the face of both the shop floor and the support around those folks. So it's pretty exciting. When it comes to like, where do you invest and how do you sort of look to the future? I think that in any situation where you have an enormous amount of change or an enormous amount of uncertainty, the key is to stay as flexible as possible, right? Like, to me, there should be a direct correlation between the level of uncertainty and the level of flexibility that you have. And when I say flexibility, I mean, obviously in terms of our strategy, but also in terms of our equipment. How flexible is our equipment in terms of our workforce, and how flexible they are and multi-skilled they are in terms of their capabilities, flexibility of our balance sheet so that we can easily pivot and do things, as needed. So for instance, we invest in flexible programmable equipment on our shop floor. So CNC machines that we can program. The cost of the machine compared to the cost of the tooling to program it and set it up for a particular part. The tooling part is maybe 10 to 15% of the cost of the overall equipment. So you can easily retool it for another job, is my point. That type of equipment tends to cost a little bit more. However, the flexibility that it offers is enormous. It gives you an enormous advantage, both in terms of being able to, change over to do a completely different part if the market has shifted and there's something else required, but also in terms of just continuous improvement, design changes for that particular component to make it, better quality, lower cost, more efficient. You can more easily make those changes than having sort of dedicated special purpose equipment, which a lot of companies tend to invest in because it is cheaper and it uses, sometimes less labor as well. But even the automation can be, you have a choice of flexible or not flexible. So I'm always going to go for the flexible, a robot that, again, I can program, as opposed to what we call a gantry system that's, again, more dedicated and it's designed just for that line. And when that line goes away, I can't use it. So I think that that's the key point, really, is stay as flexible as you can, and then have a workforce that's capable of reprogramming and pivoting as you need to, as those technologies continue to evolve.
So you stressed flexibility and adapting to change there. Does that apply to the people you are hiring and the people you want to join Linamar and help grow it? It strikes me that whatever people are taught in a university is really important. You referenced, you've been a bit of a lifelong learner, and you did your MBA at a time, during a period of time when you were helping run a company and raising a family and all this sort of thing. So you're committed to lifelong learning, but how should people coming out of university today or in university today look at learning in terms of, and look at learning and look at change, and how important do you believe it is to have a growth mindset about change and everyone's individual skills and toolkit.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It is essential in today's rapidly evolving world in terms of both technology and also markets and new things happening, that we get comfortable with change, right? That we are constantly striving for improvement, finding new ways to do things, and learning. You know, I learn something almost every day. And, you know, I've been in this business a long time, but I look to learn things every day. And I encourage our people to learn something every day. And, you know, continuous improvement, learning, evolving, sharing the learning across the organization is a key part of the culture that we have at Linamar. And I think it's really essential, you know, and I also believe that every member of our team feels like they play a part in that they play a role in continuous improvement, in coming up with ideas on how we can do things differently, better, to improve safety, to improve quality, to improve cost, to improve product integrity. Everybody feels like they own that. And, you know, we encourage ideas to be submitted. We target 10 ideas submitted per person per year. Is something we actually track, that we're looking almost every month that somebody has come up with some kind of idea, small or big. It doesn't have to be big, it can be small, you know, but every little improvement makes a difference. And, you know, and then getting people just comfortable with change, right? People aren't naturally comfortable with change. So if you live in an environment where you're constantly changing and evolving and improving and, you know, trying to do things differently, then you start to get more comfortable with it. So, you know, as students heading out to your first roles, I mean, look for those opportunities to grow, and, you know, teach yourself to get comfortable with change, right? To, you know, sometimes it feels uncomfortable, but you're growing and learning and improving in that moment.
That's great advice. Electrification as part of energy transition. Be interested in your thoughts on that, and also how do you view so electrification, energy transition, and also broadly sustainability, and how Linamar is leading in these areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sustainability is an overarching part of our strategy as an organization. It is something that is guiding the product development technologies of each one of our businesses, is to find ways to be more environmentally beneficial, to improve the technologies we are already making, and also evolve to brand new products that can help in terms of you know, our environment and how we can do things better and differently. I actually think that the advanced manufacturing field is one that is playing a really important role in regards to sustainability and environment, in improving the environment and solving some of the world's most challenging issues in terms of climate change, as well as, you know, access to water, access to food. I mean, I look at our agricultural business, you know, we're finding ways to improve efficiency of the harvest, to increase the yield out of our fields to feed a growing population. In our automotive business, electrification is a massive change that is evolving, and we are like so excited to be part of that and driving that as well, with new technologies for electrified vehicles, whether they be battery electric or fuel cell electric vehicles, which we think will play an increasingly important role in the future. So, you know, when we look at the whole evolution of electrification, I see it as a multi-step and multi-decade process, by the way. So the first step is evolving into hybrid electric vehicles, which, you know, many companies are well into. Many consumers also own hybrid vehicles of some type. leading to battery electric vehicles, which are, increasingly, there's more and more platforms being developed globally. We're somewhere around 10 or 11% of global vehicles are already battery electric. So, we're getting some traction there. And that will grow pretty rapidly over the next 10 years to be, more like 40 or 50% of the market. And then ultimately, we think fuel cell electric vehicles, which run off of hydrogen, are better in the sense that they're truly green, from fuel source right through to through production and running of the vehicle, because when you run off hydrogen, you can make the hydrogen from water using renewable energy, so solar or wind. And in the fuel cell process, that hydrogen turns back into water. So you put energy into the water to get the hydrogen and oxygen separated. In the fuel cell process, you reunite the hydrogen and the oxygen to create water again and liberate that energy. So in some ways, it's the hydrogen is just a storage vehicle, and you are actually running your car on renewable energy. You're running it on the solar or wind energy that was used to make that hydrogen. And we think that somewhere around 2030, the total cost of ownership of a fuel cell electric vehicle will, be in line with that of a battery electric or internal combustion. And we'll start to see the fuel cell market grow. I would say the 2030s will be for fuel cell vehicles what the last 10 years have been for battery electric. So kind of getting some traction and starting to grow to a more meaningful level by the end of that decade.
Interesting. And Dalhousie actually, or rather Tesla, has one partnership with the university on battery, and it is the Dalhousie University has a battery lab headed by Dr. Jeffrey Don and a team of people there who are working with Tesla and have for several years. So it's an area that Dow's actually very interested in. So we're going to turn this over to our students and or alum as well. And I saw a couple questions flashing past, but just you're a learner, you're very committed to learning, you're very disciplined about learning. What do you read to keep up on things besides industry? I know you probably read industry journals and that kind of, but what are the publications that you would recommend to somebody in their early 20s that they just ought to read consistently every week if they are going to be the kind of thinker who can really and have an understanding to bring value to a company, theirs or somebody else's?
Yeah, I like to read a variety of news from a variety of media outlets. I try not to read media that's streamed to me, because I think that media that is streamed to me is just feeding my bias, right? So it's not giving me alternate viewpoints. So I try to go out and seek out media and information that I can look at from a variety of perspectives. So I think that's one really important thing, that we try and seek out the opposing viewpoint instead of just allowing our existing biases to be reinforced with news that streams to us in that way. So, I'll have open on my browser probably 10 different media sources that I will literally look at every day to see, and they're from different parts of the world. So some are North American based, some are European based, some are financial based, others are more general news. And I think it gives me a good kind of picture from a variety of different perspectives of things that are going on in the world and what different folks are thinking about it. So, I'm obviously going to read, the Globe and Mail and the National Post, but I'm also looking at the New York Times, Washington papers, BBC, Reuters, other European news sources, Financial Times, Wall Street Journal. I quite like The Economist. I think it gives a lot of good information. There's a part of The Economist that's sort of a brief, the world in brief, I think it's called. Excuse me. And that gives you a really good snapshot of what are the important things that are going on in the world right now. So I try and look at all of those things and just get a different perspective on what's going on in the world from all of those different areas. And then, of course, whatever industry you're in, you're going to be reading information that is more particular to those industries and those publications as well. But I think the more you read, the more you know, and again, challenge your own conclusions and don't be afraid to look for those opposing viewpoints so that you can develop a balanced decision on, what your perspective is on something.
Great. No, I heartily commend that advice, and I agree, particularly on The Economist, which had a great piece last week on the U.S. economy and the Inflation Reduction Act and how it is actually getting traction. That kind of look. We have some members of the Dow community on who have some questions, and welcome. Please speak up and direct questions to Linda or myself. You can have me anytime. Linda's special, so focus them on Linda, who really knows what she's talking about, which is another advantage she has over me. So how are we herding these questions?
So I think we had Twinkle, who came in first, and coincidentally, right after she posed the question, you actually answered her question. So that was fantastic. But she did pose a second question. So did you want to unmute yourself and ask your second question?
Yeah, Shelley, thank you so much. So hi, Linda. Good evening from here. And so my question that I wanted to ask from you is basically around this thing, being a senior leader in the organization. I just wanted to understand what are the steps you are taking at your end, just to make sure how the collaborations are happening very smoothly with the government organizations and with the multilateral organization. Because in the past, I was working with a consulting firm, and currently here in Nova Scotia, I'm working with Public Service Commission. So just wanted to understand the difference, how all these things happen at your end. Thank you.
I'm sorry, with respect to sustainability particularly?
You can talk about anything. I just wanted to understand about the collaboration thing. How do you collaborate on maybe public-private partnerships kind of a thing?
So the intersection of government policy and business. Is that the idea?
Exactly.
Okay, good question. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's really important to collaborate, talk to people from a variety of sectors in order to come up with the best solution. So, absolutely, we have always worked closely with our various levels of government. I have been involved in a whole variety of different government initiatives to try to bring the business or manufacturing viewpoint to the table, which I think is really important. And I'm happy to do so when asked. I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but I almost always say yes anytime a government official asks for my help on something, because I think if I am not willing to help, then I can't complain later if I don't like the direction the policy is going. So I think it's really important that we all play a role and help to guide policy decisions. In terms of collaboration more broadly, I think there's huge value in collaborating with other businesses in our sector, with our suppliers, with our customers, in order to come up with better solutions. And the supercluster or innovation cluster is, I think, what we're calling them now, that Scott mentioned, that I've been involved in for several years, is just a great example of that, of collaboration. The whole concept of these innovation clusters was to gather together companies, small, medium, large, in certain sectors and encourage them to work together to solve common problems. So all the projects that NGen has, which is the advanced manufacturing supercluster that I'm involved with, has funded, have been partnerships between companies, not necessarily formally, they're not necessarily JVs or anything like that, but they're just working together, collaborating, sharing technologies to try to advance more quickly, the development of a new technology. And I think that that's fantastic. And you can achieve so much more when you share that technology and you can get someplace a lot quicker. So I think collaboration is really important. I hope that answers your question, Michael.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And I think we have Haley Bain, who is one of our alumni, who is up next with a question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So hi, Linda. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm Haley. I am in HR. I support investment banking with Scott at BMO. And so I just had a question, whether right now or it's been applicable in the past, with you as a leader, how do you keep your team motivated? And has there been any initiatives you've tried in the past that maybe didn't land as well or didn't work, and what you learned from that?
Yeah, I mean, employee motivation is absolutely key to successful leadership, right? Like trying to rally your team around a common idea, a goal, is really critical, and alignment to achieve that. So, I mean, I think the first and foremost, the most important thing is communication in order to do that effectively, right? So everybody needs to know what you're trying to achieve, why, and how, right? So we can all kind of get aligned around what's happening, get feedback from people as to, the ideas that you're considering, and then, lock into your strategy, your goals, and make sure everybody is really clear around that. I think that's very helpful. And also it's motivational in the sense that everybody feels involved, right? They feel engaged. This isn't a strategy just imposed upon them. It's a strategy that, we've gotten feedback from, and therefore engagement around. I think also, a good way to motivate people is through challenge and, interaction between them. So for instance, we have a program at Linamar, and it's based on sort of a philosophy that we have as an organization of always balancing customer, employee, and financial satisfaction in everything we do. And we symbolize that balance by a three-legged stool. We call it the stepping stool of success. And we have taken that philosophy and made it sort of an integral part of how we do things in the organization. So, it's how we articulate our strategy, it's how we measure our performance. And we have this system that, is across every plant globally, where we measure metrics of satisfaction for employee, customer, and financial on this three-legged stepping stool scorecard. And it is, so each plant is striving for achieving green, it's color-coded system, but they also kind of compete with each other. And that's motivational as well, right? Because you want to be number one, right? You want to be number one, the number one plant in Linamar, not number 66. And so that's motivational to help keep people, focused together on the same thing and feeling like you're achieving something as a team. So, I think those are a couple things that are important. So communication, having a way that you've created that, you know, a way to embed your philosophies and goals and strategies into the day-to-day, how you do things, creating a bit of competition, creating a bit of team spirit around that, celebrating your successes together, you know, and being together. I mean, frankly, I think that one of the biggest killers of motivation and team alignment is working from home. I've been against it from day one. I think it is killing companies from the inside out, and they don't even know it. Because when we're not together, we're not as strong of a team. When we're together, we're aligned, you know, we're teaching each other, we're developing our young talent, we are more creative, we're more innovative, and we're more motivated when we're together. So the sooner that we get away from this idea that somehow we can be aligned and motivated in a team when we're not even in the same building, you know, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's what we're finding just in the banking and investment banking side is there's more flexibility now, but people want to be in the offices and young people want to be there because they don't want to miss out on the network being built, the problem solving, the skills being learned, the mentorship. It's awfully hard to mentor on Zoom calls, and mentorship, which actually leads me how, you know, your advice, you've got 4 children who are in, you know, roughly the same ballpark age-wise with a lot of the folks on this call. So you're probably giving advice a fair bit from time to time. These aren't your kids, so
They don't want my advice. Like every kid, they don't want to hear from their parents, you know. They're uninterested in my advice.
Well, these folks are, and I am. But advice for people as they're looking at their career and life ahead of them, the world's very different from when you and I graduated from university. And my own feeling is that there's never been a better time. It's the opportunities are remarkable, and the limits on people are, and you know, for just about everybody, everything has improved and the opportunities are immense. But what is your advice to people as they're looking at this big, broad future and things like work-life balance, as an example? You managed to do an awful lot. Like, you seem to have a sense of urgency about your life and work. Like there's no wasted time. You seem to have a real sense of energy and enthusiasm of getting stuff done. What do you say to young people who are looking at what they should be doing to really maximize this precious time we have in work and life?
Yeah, great question, and I heartily agree. I mean, my one piece of advice for sure is live every moment of your life. Like, squeeze as much in as you can. I think you can do a lot more than you think you can. I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for what we can do and not do. I mean, I think the busiest possibly that I've ever been was in and around 96, 97. I had a baby in 96. I had started my MBA through the executive program. I had another baby in 97. I was starting up my second plant. So I was running a plant, starting a second plant, and my husband and I were building a house. And it's like, I don't think I've ever been that busy in my life. So now everything else looks like easy compared to those days of 2 little pregnancies, 2 babies, doing an MBA, running 2 plants, building this house. I mean, but you can it's easy to say, oh, I'm only going to do one of those things, right? And then I'll do the next one. I think that you should just go for it, just do the things that you want to do and don't hesitate, because I think you can do a lot more than you think you can. And yes, there's things that got squeezed out the edges during those years that I didn't get to do. But, what they came back, when a little more time opened up as things evolve. So, don't be afraid to do that. I think a couple of other pieces of advice, and this is kind of related, don't be afraid to apply for or take a job that you're not 100% ready for or qualified for. I think that sometimes we can be, a bit risk averse in terms of looking at, a list of qualifications for a job, which, no offense to the HR folks on the line, but we tend to over specify on a job posting what we're looking for, everything and the kitchen sink, and we know that those people don't actually exist. So don't feel like if you're not checking all the boxes on that job posting, just if you think it's an interesting job and you think you might be able to do it, just throw your hat in the ring. There's no risk to that. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I would emphasize that advice a little bit more so for the women on the call, because I think women tend to look at that list of 10 qualifications and think, oh, I can only do 5 of those things, I'm not going to apply for that job. Whereas a guy looks at it and says, I can kind of do one of those things. What the hell? I'll throw my resume in and see what happens. So, let's all be risk takers like that. And, just throw your hat in the ring. You don't know. And if you're not 100% ready, you can stretch and grow, right? To do that job. I mean, obviously you don't want to be well underwater, but if you're only a few feet underwater, you can, get to the surface. So don't be afraid to do that, I think, is another good piece of advice. And then I would say also, don't be afraid of sort of lateral moves so that you can get experience in a different discipline. I mentioned at the outset, when I first started at Linamar, I moved around from engineering to quality to materials to accounting, estimating, every different area. And it was enormously helpful to me when I became a leader of people in all those areas. So, I would definitely recommend, lateral moves into other areas, rotational programs that can give you a variety of experience. And the last thing I'll say, and it's kind of circling back to where we started, is don't work from home if you have a choice, okay? And here's why. When you are present physically, you are more in the know of what's going on in a way that you just can't be if you're not there. There's so much that goes on informally in a work environment that you hear informally. You're having a discussion with somebody when you go to get a cup of coffee, whatever, you're walking past somebody's office, you hear something, you stop and talk to them about it. You will be more in the know if you're physically in there. So if the choice is available to you to work in person, I would 100% recommend that you do so. You will know more about what's going on. You will be more aligned with the team. You will learn more every single day, to come back to that. And you will be in people's line of sight, out of sight, out of mind. If you're there, you're engaged, you're visible, you're the one that's going to get promoted. So that is my last piece of recommendation as you head out into the workplace.
That's super recommendation. And I don't know whether we have another question in the docket lined up or not. Shelley?
We actually have multiple questions, which we unfortunately won't have time to get to all of them. So I think if just because we're getting close on time and I don't want to take too much of everyone's time, the next question, I've been taking them in the order that they were posed. Kirk was up with our next question if he wants to jump in, and this may be the last question, unfortunately.
Maybe bundle a couple questions.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I was going to say I could bundle a few questions there. I know I had quite a few going through. Thanks, Linda, for being here. It's been great to learn. I actually work in continuous improvement for Michelin, and I'm calling in from New Glasgow at the moment. I graduated from Dow recently, and it's really exciting to hear the discussion, especially with regards to advanced manufacturing. Two quick questions that I had for you, because number one, I think what our generation truly can rallying behind is sustaining our environment. And what I've realized is how much potential we have to do that in the manufacturing, and especially advanced manufacturing. And I didn't quite realize how much potential there was until I had the opportunity to take on a co-op and have been hired on full time now. But I'm wondering if you could speak to how you envision the circular economy in Canada evolving over the next 10 years. And are you seeing potential to utilize recycled products in the manufacturing process? And that's sort of my first question. And then secondly, could you even speak to how our government can attract more advanced manufacturing to Canada and just the potential value in that?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the second question, because I think that the coming decades are a time for Canada to really flourish in terms of advanced manufacturing. And here's why, and it ties to question one. Canada has a very clean energy grid. More than 80% of the energy created in this country is green. And in certain provinces in Ontario, the energy grid is 94% clean. That means 94% of the energy that is produced in Ontario is not emitting carbon. That is huge. Okay, so when you think about how more and more companies are looking to have a more sustainable footprint, and many companies, ourselves included, have made a pledge to a net zero future, and different companies have different dates from 2035, 2040, 2050, but in that range, which isn't that far away, including their supply base. So all of a sudden, where you manufacture things matters a lot. So I mentioned earlier, 45% or 40% of our global facilities are right here in Canada, most of them in Ontario, 94% clean energy, the rest of them in Manitoba, 98% clean energy. That means almost everything we're making in this country does not have a big carbon price tag on it, if you want to think of it that way. And I think that's going to matter more and more. So as companies get closer to these timelines times where they have pledged to be net zero, including their supply base, they have to source products from people who are producing from net zero facilities. We can do that right now with things we're producing in Ontario and in Manitoba. We have further invested in solar panels. We have solar panels on the roofs of almost every single plant that we have in Ontario. That offsets another 2% of our energy usage. So when I look at the carbon footprint of our Ontario plants, it's like 96% clean. So I think that is enormously important. And when you couple it with other strengths that we have as a country, our access to critical minerals, our access to clean water, we are a seismically stable part of the world. We have a great education system. We have a country that is open and encouraging immigration to bring more talent into this country. All of this kind of comes together to paint a picture, in my opinion, of Canada over the next decades and century as being an incredibly important place where things will be made, for the rest of the world in a clean way. So I'm really excited about that. I think and we're all part of this, right? You guys are all part of it. We're part of it. And I think we need to talk more about it so people know what we've got going on here and how this is going to become more and more important. And just as an example of that, and the fact that this is starting to, gain some traction, we're seeing a real resurgence of the automotive industry in Ontario. So for a few years, we'd seen sort of declining levels of vehicle production in Ontario, and therefore, some suppliers, not growing here. I just like to say that was not us. We've been growing in Canada every year for many, many years, and continue to invest in our Canadian facilities. But what we're seeing now is more companies looking to locate here because of that clean energy grid. And a great example is battery manufacturing. So manufacturing of a battery for a vehicle is enormously emittive. You use an enormous amount of energy to make that battery. In fact, if you make a battery for a large sedan, like 100 kilowatt battery pack, and you do it in a country like the United States, which is 62% fossil fuel energy. Okay, so 62% of their energy comes from carbon-based sources. You create 17 tons of CO2 to make one battery pack. Okay, 17 tons of CO2. A typical internal combustion car generates like 5 or 6 tons, or let's say 7 tons of CO2 a year. So that battery pack is like 2 to 3 years of internal combustion engine driving, just to make the battery pack, if you make it in an energy grid that's not clean. Whereas if you make the battery in an energy grid like in Ontario or Manitoba or Quebec, that is largely clean, you don't create that big sort of, that huge amount of carbon emissions that now you have to kind of amortize over the lifetime of that electric vehicle. And the word's getting out, because in the last 12 to 18 months, there's been 4 major battery plant announcements for Ontario. 4 different companies have announced. So there's an LG plant going in. I think it's a JV with LG and Chrysler in Windsor, Unicorn in Kingston. There's a Volkswagen plant announced in St. Thomas. Magna's building a plant in Brampton. 4 major battery plants being built in Ontario. So like that's just going to bring more and more investment. So I think it's a great example of what's coming.
Super.
Wow. Thank you so much. And for not only speaking to us, but for being a leader in the space. And I've just been so engaged this whole chat. So just wanted to say thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Kirk. If you ever get sick of Michelin, you know who to call.
Absolutely.
Michelin has been a great Canadian and Nova Scotian corporate citizen, I gotta tell you.
Awesome. That's great. Great company.
It's super. Well, Linamar is a super company. So I think there may be, I saw someone flash, and now we got you in respect of your time, Linda. But do you mind if just see if there's another one?
Yeah, sure. Just one last one.
Thanks a lot.
So we had Regan Connor was the next question.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Regan.
My name is Regan, and I'm a performance and engagement specialist at KPMG Canada. Thank you so much for your time today. I loved how you started off talking about the importance of continually evolving and adopting that growth mindset, which I love to hear because we emphasize that a lot in a lot of the work that we do. But change can be a very scary word for people who are experiencing that with a lot of our initiatives that we are trying to roll out across the organization. So what are the steps that an organization can take to get our people excited about change and actually, feel like that they are actually part of the evolution of the company? Because change management can be a very challenging process, as you may as well know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that the key to successful change is engaging people in being part of the change, right? So that people don't feel like change isn't being imposed upon them, but rather that they are part of the process. Like I mentioned earlier, we're targeting 10 implemented ideas per person per year. That's, that in itself is a huge proponent of change, right? Because you're every month almost trying to come up with an idea that you can get implemented, right? So you're an instigator of change. You feel like you're part of the process, as opposed to it being imposed upon you. So when you do that, then you create a culture that is used to change, that is welcoming of change, that is always looking for opportunities to change. And then it becomes less scary, right? It becomes less uncomfortable when it's something that's happening, all the time. It's like, physical training, when you're doing something for the first time, it feels hard, but once you keep doing it to do. So I think that's a really important part of managing that change. And then, I think you need to be, when you have large changes that you're trying to put in place, I think that understanding kind of, almost person by person or group by group, like who's on side, who's not on side, and how do we get, if there's somebody who's against something, so you're probably not going to get them on side to be for that change, but just if you can at least get them to neutral, then they're not undermining what you're trying to do. So trying to understand that every person is motivated in a different way. So, when I'm trying to do something different, I'm going to sell it to Jim in a way that's completely different to how I sell it to Andrea, because what Jim and Andrea like to do and, are motivated by is different, whether they're on the same team or not, right? So trying to characterize that change in a way that would be appealing and motivational to each person individually or each group individually is, I think, also an important part of change management. But to me, the most important thing is just creating that culture where everybody's always looking for ways to change and improve. And that in itself, makes implementation of additional change easier.
Great. Linda, you've been super and no surprise. Thank you. On behalf of our students and our alum, thank you ever so much. You've done so much in the last 20 years, and to think you're just getting started, I can only imagine what you're going to accomplish in the next 20 years. And I hope that I can convince you that part of that time might be in public service or elected office, because I think you'd be super, and we need more business leaders in government. I really believe that. And happy to talk about that anytime or to run your campaign. But I want to thank all of you for joining us. And I mean that. We've got witnesses. No, but I want to thank you, Linda. This has been super. I always am impressed whenever I hear you speak. You are thoughtful, you're passionate, you're focused on the future, and you're excited about it. And which gives me just one piece of advice I'd give to anybody at any stage of their life. For God's sakes, get excited about things. This is where we are so lucky in so many ways in Canada to begin with. And we're also very lucky to be living in the time we're living, because there's never been a better time. And sometimes we don't appreciate what brilliant opportunities we have. There's no risk of you ever not understanding or appreciating or embracing or celebrating opportunities. And that's one of the reasons I think you're super. So thank you ever so much. Say hi to Ed, and looking forward to seeing you in person sometime.
Sounds good. Thanks so much. It's been great, everybody.
Thank you so much to both of you, both Scott and Linda, for sharing your time, your wisdom. So valuable. We really appreciate it. Thank you as well to everyone who attended. If you're interested in viewing as our other Speakeasy session, by all means, please visit the Dow Management YouTube channel and make sure you pay attention for upcoming Faculty of Management alumni events and panels and everything else that we have going on.